While the Kansas City Chiefs may look perfect, one glaring issue might hold them back from a three-peat. We got all of that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast. Keep it up with all the biggest stories from around the National Football League. It's Tuesday, so you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL, myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson NOLA on your favorite social media. And on today's episode, we're taking a look at what can hold some of the biggest contenders of the 2024 NFL season back for this year, including we're going to be taking a look at our Yike and Like as well, the Green Bay Packers in prime position to impress because disappointing probably wouldn't be super surprising. We'll also take a look at the Cincinnati Bengals, what stands in their way, of course, at the quarterback spot. And we're going to kick everything off with the Kansas City Chiefs, whose cornerback room looks to be in dire straits. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On NFL brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. While you've gotten through the NHL and NBA playoffs, still a ton to check out over at FanDuel with the NFL season right around the corner. The WNBA bigger and better than it's ever been. And of course, the MLB continuing to roll along as well. So go and check them out today, because right now, every customer is getting a boost or bonus every single day. So there's something for every person, every player, every day over at FanDuel.com. Go and check them out today to get started. Make every moment more. Luke, the Kansas City Chiefs are threatening for the first ever three-peat, but that cornerback room that they have seems to be maybe their biggest obstacle to realizing that opportunity. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's hard because it's the Chiefs, right? And right. I think a lot of people will agree that last year was the worst Chiefs team and that we've seen in a while, and it just didn't matter, because Mahomes was just still Mahomes. But the wide receiver core was a thing. The drops issues was a thing all year. Their defense had ups and downs, but that was anchored really hard by L'Jarius Snead, and losing him is a huge loss. And it doesn't feel like they've had a serious attempt at replacing him. That secondary is really patchwork. You've got Trent McDuffie. He kind of broke out, and that's exciting for them. But I don't know who else. You've got whatever you have left of Justin Reed. You have third year Joshua Williams. Maybe he plays a little bit. I don't know Najee Johnson. I don't know who the Chiefs in this group can trust. And it feels like if you're game planning to play against the Chiefs, there is somebody on the field that you're targeting. That is an issue. Yeah. And now Steve Spagnuolo has made a lot of really great seasons out of rosters with holes on them that he can do that. But now you are kind of priced into going into the blitz heavy part of a Steve Spagnuolo defense, and that's counterable.
Right.
Or going into more zone heavy parts, and that's counterable. You have to do things with weaknesses now to paper over other weaknesses, and there's no way around it. You just kind of have to hope that the offense isn't going to be able to score a bunch. And so the Chiefs might have a lot of games where, its final score is 38-31, and you just kind of have to hope that Patrick Mahomes can continue to outscore teams with an aging Travis Kelce, and I don't really know who Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice. I don't really know who else you're throwing to anyways.
They added Xavier Worthy in the draft, which is probably one of the biggest steals of the draft. How they let him get to Kansas City feels dumb. You know what I mean? How do you let him go there? But you're right. I mean, they made off with. I mean, they won a Super Bowl championship with a worse wide receiver core and a worse set of pass catchers last season. But yeah, I think if there's one thing that stands in the way of Kansas City, it's going to be that cornerback room. Anytime that you lose a shutdown, lockdown island of a corner, you're going to see a little bit of regression at that position, and you're going to have to make up for that. Will it make a difference? That's going to be up to Patrick Mahomes. But if there's one thing that you're worried about in this roster, it definitely feels like it's that cornerback room. For me, Luke, on the opposite side of the NFL, jumping over to the biggest NFC contender, the San Francisco 49ers, it feels like to me, my biggest concern for them is that right side of the offensive line. That's going to be a place where they're having to, maybe look at, a couple of draft picks to be able to come in, or not draft picks, but young guys to be able to come in and maybe help them out there. Outside of Trent Williams, there's just a lot of question marks on that offensive line. The good news for San Francisco for me, though, is that Brock Purdy operates so well outside of structure that he might be able to erase some of those deficiencies on the offensive line in 2024, much like he did in 2023. But I'm just wondering if a second year of it, if in 2024, all of a sudden, maybe those deficiencies begin to outweigh a little bit of what Brock Purdy can do as defenses get a little bit more accustomed to how to rattle him and get more accustomed to having seen more of his tape, more of what he can do.
I actually kind of like John Feliciano, but that's just me. I still think
not the starter. Like there's a lot of those question marks going on over there in terms of like who starts where at right guard and right tackle.
Yeah, I hear you. I still think that the central drama in San Francisco right now is whatever is going on with Brandon Ayuk.
Yes, for
posting
sure,
Commanders tape on Instagram. I don't know what's going on over there. But the way like they lived and died last year, and like the moments that they had last year where things sort of dipped, you felt the absence of a player who was hurt, whether it was like Kittle not quite all the way or Debo going in and out of games. It's been the story
of San Francisco for a while too.
Yeah, when they have their trio, whoever that trio is, and last year Ayuk kind of became part of the trio at times. But when they have a good trio of Kittle, McCaffrey, Debo, or Ayuk, or like three of those four on, then they become this indefensible like chimera. But if you lose Ayuk to whatever is going on, if he's not going to be on the 49ers, and then you've got Kittle, who's getting older, McCaffrey and Debo, who both have extensive injury histories, how long are you going to have this thing as it is built? And is there going to come a point in the 49ers season where Brock Purdy is going to have to do more than he ever had to do last year? And last year, he could game manage. And if you know me, you know that that's not an insult for me. Game manage. Tom Brady was a game manager too. There is dignity in that, and you can absolutely be a successful quarterback all the way to the Super Bowl as a game manager. But if the 49ers have to ask for more than that from Brock Purdy, is that where you start to unlock the kind of the bozo gene, the worst parts? That's, I guess, the concern that I would have. But I do think that the Niners are in. They are like firmly in their window right now, and truly, when the concern is, what if all these really good players get injured? Like that concern applies to everybody, and if that's the best we can come up with, we probably should be the NFC favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's really wrap up here with our top contenders with looking at the Buffalo Bills. For me, this one comes down to, much like for Kansas City, they lose L'Jarius Snead. Buffalo loses Stephon Diggs, and it's a question mark of a receiver core for Josh Allen. That's kind of the biggest concern for me when it comes to Buffalo is can they overcome that?
Just a year older too. The defense, like every year it gets a little bit older. And it already sort of showed signs of decline at the end of the season, especially like later in games, I guess. But yeah, it does feel like the Bills sort of peaked in 2022. I don't know if Bills fans want to hear that, but they're a team that going into this year that I'm kind of seeing as like, are they going to still do it? Because as the division gets tougher and tougher too with Dolphins and the Jets, whatever the Jets get out of Aaron Rodgers, it's still a really good roster. There'll be a tough matchup. And the Dolphins continuing to try to build on what they did as well. I don't know. Yeah. It feels like a really tough place, and the Bills are like this kind of elder statesman team of veterans. So you kind of feel like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like the future is anywhere but now.
Yeah. You could the window closing.
The window is closing. And when you feel like a roster like that is worse than they were last year, I don't know. That gives me the EBGBs. The Bills give me the ick.
Sit well.
Put it in the newspaper.
Absolutely love it. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at a few of the other contenders, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Dallas Cowboys. And we're going to focus when it comes to Cincinnati on the one, the only Joe Burrow, because if he can't stay healthy, Cincinnati's not in the conversation. We got that coming up for you here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel. It's summer. That means it's baseball season. It's women's basketball season. It's also NFL futures season. My favorite bet at this time, every time, is Justin Jefferson over 1,300.5 yards. That's the one. That's my favorite. If he plays the full season, that would be the worst season he's ever had. So if you don't think that's going to happen, maybe you'd want to get in on that. But whatever it is, head over to FanDuel.com because they have new deals and promotions going on all the time. So check back early and often at FanDuel.com, official sports betting partner of, among other things, Major League Baseball.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. We appreciate you very much for making this your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports today as well. The 24/7 stream is available for you on YouTube as well as on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, programmed to bring you all of the biggest stories from around the world of sports, brought to you by the local experts that know the teams the best. Make sure you go check it out today, once again, on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So here we are taking a look at some of the things that stand in the way of the biggest contenders of the 2024 NFL season from, contending. And we want to start off this particular part of the show by taking a look at the Cincinnati Bengals, because for me, Luke, this one's pretty simple. The biggest obstacle for the Cincinnati Bengals, especially now that they've got T. Higgins ready to go and, they'll figure things out with Jamar Chase, whatever, is Joe Burrow and his health. That's going to be the biggest thing. The Bengals, 0.567 win percentage with Burrow, 0.429 without Burrow. Now that's only 6 and 8 over the course of that time without, but still that's a good 14 games without Joe Burrow in his first few seasons. I think this for me is the biggest catalyst, partnered with how much of the salary cap Burrow's taking up, which we've discussed on this show before in the past, and all those other things. So for me, this team lives and dies by how healthy or unhealthy Joe Burrow is in 2024.
I still think it's an O-line thing with them.
That's true. Yeah.
Of the ones we've discussed here, honestly, this one concerns me less. The wrist, by all reports, the wrist is fully good to go. It's been a while since the knee went down. So unless he's just experiences another thing and he just is a guy that has bad soft tissue or something, which medically isn't really a thing that you can prove about anybody. It's one of those things where you get a lot of unrelated injuries and you feel like this guy's injured all the time, because I always see the Q next to his name on the fantasy app, but in reality, it's just bad luck. Right. So I don't know, and like bad luck turns around. So I don't know if I'm super concerned about Burrow himself. It's just what are they going to get out of? I mean, Orlando Brown Jr. has certainly turned his stuff around since he was on the Ravens and all that, but what do they get out of this O-line, and how upright can they keep Joe Burrow? Or do they have to continue to be a quick strike offense, which Joe Burrow can do, but it sort of neuters a lot of the other cool stuff that he could do if he had a little bit more time.
100%.
So that's what it is for me. I still more or less believe in that defense. And especially the front with like Trey Hendrickson and Sheldon Rankins, a couple of I don't know. I even without DJ Reader, like I still believe in it. There. Yeah, for sure. So I feel like as long as you don't get bad luck, Bengals can be in this. But then once you get to the future, with T. Higgins leaving, and you're probably paying Jamar Chase a lot of money, which is certainly going to be worth it. But I don't know. Like, this might be the best chance this offense has to be the juggernaut that you can be with Joe Burrow, but you just got to keep him upright.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those two things go hand in hand too. I mean, the the less he's hit, the better the offensive line plays. The less he's hit, the less you have to be concerned about another injury or a recurring injury or anything like that. I think all of it goes hand in hand. I want to see Joe Burrow do well. Obviously, go Tigers. Come on. What do I look like here? An idiot? Like I want to see them do better or do their best. But I think they're at their best when Joe Burrow's on the field. They got to keep him on the field. Let's take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles here, going back to the NFC to wrap this up as we look at Philly and Dallas. For me, when it comes to Philadelphia, my biggest thing is just kind of who they are. Who are they? Like, what's their identity? They've had both of those changes at offensive and defensive coordinator this offseason. That's not always a bad thing. It can be challenging, but it's not always a bad thing. But just after that meltdown at the end of last year where the team just kind of went off the rails, is that now who they are, or is that something that they're going to have to at least combat throughout that entire time? So I wonder how the pressure builds up for this team after falling short in 2023.
I really like what they've done on defense, and it's mostly because I'm a big Zimmer guy. I think you just have to have you just have to have the like Skip Bayless-esque questions about Dak Prescott. At what point do we stop looking at him and going, what may be if only everything goes right, Yeah. So yeah, I see. I don't know how far Dak Prescott can take you.
Yeah, that's my biggest question for Dallas as well.
Yeah, both because of just health, right? Like there's that same Joe Burrow thing, but also there have definitely been a lot of times like that, especially in the postseason where Dak Prescott comes in and this should be your year, and then you totally like fall apart, that debacle at the end of the season. And then with the Eagles as well, I think that both these teams are sort of, it's almost more of a mental thing, right? Like you take the drubbing that both of these teams took in the wild card round and you basically run it back. How like that Cowboys game feels like the kind of game that ends an era. Yeah. Doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, and we all thought that they were going to move off of Mike McCarthy at that point. Now he's back. There's another big question mark for you. Like they didn't start their rebuild or anything like that. Like they just kind of said, okay, well, we'll just try it again. And I don't know if that was the best choice. Yeah.
And I think the Eagles have a little bit of the same thing the Bills have going on, where it's like, well, you're a year older. How much are we going to get at everybody?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing for me with Dallas, too, is having to replace two starters in your offensive line always stinks. But when one of them is Tyron Smith and then the other one is Tyler Biadasz, that's pretty tough. Now, I do think that they have some talented rookies that can step into those places. Tyler Guyton at the tackle spot. I assume Connor Beebe will be in the discussion, former K-State Wildcat, when it comes to center, but now you're moving positions for him and things like that. So I'm really curious to see how that all works out. I think anytime that you're having to rely on rookies to force progress in your offensive line, at best, it's the question mark, right? You never know for sure how it's going to pan out. So for me, that's a pretty big question mark, is Dallas's offensive line as well.
Yeah. And while we're on the NFC, I think we should mention the Lions here. Made it to the NFC Championship and essentially are running it back. And as contender, like of all of these teams, the Lions are young. They stayed relatively healthy. There's nobody that they're like, there's no load-bearing player that's going to miss 8 games every year.
Right.
I think if you wanted to nitpick, you would say, okay, if I'm double teaming Amon-Ra St. Brown, who am I afraid of? Is it Laporta?
Exactly.
Is it Jameson Williams? Who's going to win one-on-one a whole bunch? I think that's a reasonable question. Khalif Raymond, they've got speed, but Jameson Williams and Khalif Raymond have been, these guys are not top 40 receivers. They're not even, top receivers on their own team. And maybe Sam Laporta can be that guy, and they're just, they do a Kittle thing with him, but I think that would require a step up. And then I think on the edges on defense, right? Like they had a big problem in run defense last year. And that was a big reason that San Francisco was able to mount the comeback that they were. They add DJ Reader. They add Marcus Davenport, who both you and I know, if he can stay healthy. But other than that, like Aiden Hutchinson stands stout and set the edge. That's not his game. He's a quick twitch guy.
Right. Yep.
So what are we doing if you're just running counter on these guys all day to the edges? That I think maybe is the biggest question mark, but it's a much more niche and specific problem than these other teams that are like, well, I don't know if you're going to fall apart entirely now. Like, that's not the way you feel. The Lions definitely on the ups, while a lot of these other teams are hoping they can just keep things afloat with their franchise quarterbacks that they drafted, like Burrow or whoever.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the Lions are in a really good position going into 2024 based on what they've done. But they're not the only NFC North team that's in good position. I'll mention the Green Bay Packers in just a moment, but I promise you, it's not because of what they've done. It's because of their brand. We got that coming for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Every week, Luke and I do our yike and our like here on Tuesday, something we liked, something we didn't like from the week before. And I want to lead us off with my like this week, which is a little bit of a double-edged sword, Luke. And I think you're going to have some things to add to this as well, as you know the Green Bay Packers pretty intimately, covering the Minnesota Vikings. So for me, my like is that the Green Bay Packers are kind of in perfect position to impress in 2024. They're young. They haven't done anything about it. They ran everything back from last season, and now they're in a situation to where either they fail because they're young and everybody goes, well, they're young, or they succeed and everyone's impressed because of how young they are. It's a really good position to be in if you're the Green Bay Packers and you're going to get that type of favorable treatment, which I think they are in store for with the brand that they have and the brand that they are. Am I wrong in assuming
it's incredible
this of the Green Bay Packers? And
it's incredible how quick we are to coddle a fan base that has seen no pain.
Not incredible, but it feels incredulous at the same time.
It's, I don't know. There are questions with the Packers, right? Like, everybody's really excited about Jordan Love's ended the season super, super hot. The parallels of Aaron Rodgers ending 2008 super hot and all that. I get it. There are statistical question marks. There are inconsistencies. Are we going to see that Jordan Love, or are we going to see the Jordan Love that showed up in the other 8 games? Peter Bukowski was podcasting about Kirk Cousins in October last year. Like, we are not that far removed from it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but yeah, like the PR is so perfectly set up. They'll never do anything wrong. Like, I think about the way that the national media would approach the Vikings if they made a 7th seed and then ran it all back with like undrafted receivers. Oh my God, they would get lambasted. What are they doing? Can't they admit that it's over? Like, it's amazing. And by the way, the Jordan Love contract situation, I don't know if there is an easy answer to that. I mean, I think they just have to pay him. But the risks associated with that, everybody acknowledges that those are there. And you wish you had more than like an 8-game hot streak to go off of. I don't know. There's still question marks there. That doesn't mean that I'm super sure that they're going to be bad or anything like that. They'll be better than the Vikings, who are in the dumps right now. But I don't know. We don't have to coddle them. All right, it's okay. we don't have to set up for every single thing to be just perfect for the Green Bay Packers anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those weird spots. It's like when a team goes out there and loses to a team that they shouldn't have lost, but there was an injury, and everybody goes, had that player not gotten injured, then they probably would have won.
Only certain teams get that treatment.
Yes,
all right,
yes. And Green Bay feels like they're getting that treatment going into 2024 for sure. All right, why don't you jump to your yike, because I know this is a big topic here.
So okay. In the world of NFL media, the Around the NFL podcast is the first podcast that I listened, the first NFL show that I ever listened to, and it is no more. It is been dissolved, and only one of the members is even staying with NFL media. I don't know, as of this recording, what Dan Hansis and Mark Sessler are doing. Very excited about it, though. But like, listening to those three and Chris Wessling when he was alive, formed the way that I think about football. And for it to go out the way that it did, with a random show in May being the final show, no finale, no thoughtful goodbyes, no understanding, hey, this is what's going to happen, very little communication about what's going to happen next, and to essentially just get like folded into the greater NFL media diet is really bad. And I think too many media companies don't understand what they have and lose their authenticity. They see stuff like Locked On, dailiness working, and go, well, let's do daily things as if that's the secret sauce. But the secret sauce is always going to be authenticity. And that's what the Around the NFL podcast always had. I was always a big fan of it. And that's what I try to do. That's what I try to have, that authenticity. But it gets a big old yike from me to essentially show that the people in charge of those decisions have absolutely no sense for why people gravitated toward that.
Yeah. There was a similar situation with NFL media not long ago with one of my favorite shows. Steve Weiss and Jim Trotter used to have a show called Huddle and Flow that was outstanding. And very similar approach by NFL media to where it was just kind of canned out of nowhere, very unceremonious, and it was just gone. And stuff. And so it just really goes to, and same thing, right? Like authenticity built what that brand was becoming. Didn't get as long a run, of course. But I think we see this over and over again with these companies of just simply not understanding what product they have and not understanding that, trying to just flip a mold of it or something like that, or flip a name or something like that isn't going to get them where it is that they're wanting to go. So it stinks. I'm excited to see what's next for everybody there and everything like that, or wherever they head and everything. But man, yeah, it stunk. It stinks to lose that show for sure. I'll jump to my yike here, which I'll go through pretty quickly. For me, like we were talking about these teams today who are contenders and what could potentially get in their way, which is kind of nitpicking and stuff like that. This little thing could be the thing that gets in their way, all that kind of stuff. But I was looking at some of the other teams out there that like aren't contenders and what can get in their way. And one glaring team really stood out to me was the Las Vegas Raiders. You want to talk about a team that just didn't, period. It
was like year 5 of this, by the way.
Yeah,
you're just chilling.
They're just we're just gonna wait and we'll figure out the quarterback situation eventually. But like Gardner Minshew is not going to be their answer. Aiden O'Connell is not going to be their answer. They just kind of rolled into this offseason really with this sort of look at maybe they wanted Jaden Daniels or nothing else is maybe what it was for them. But I don't know. I just don't feel any swing at competing from this team at the most important position on the field. Now, they had some nice free agency acquisitions over the course of the offseason, do not get me wrong, but just no real swing at quarterback unless they're just trying to do what Tampa did last year. But, I mean, even I'll admit that there's a gap between Baker Mayfield and Gardner Minshew. They're not the same. They're not the same. And
no, it's Aiden O'Connell's season. Gardner Minshew's just the backup, right?
Right, yeah, whatever it's going to be. And then the weapons around – Tampa and everything like that. I guess you've got Devontae Adams, of course, but man, it just really feels like Las Vegas just didn't even
Devontae Adams even want to be there.
Right. They just didn't even start at the gun, man. They just kind of pulled up and they're just kind of letting everybody else run the race.
The AFC West this is reminding me a lot of the AFC East circa 2003. Where the Patriots were very clearly by 03, 04, right? They were in there this is a dynasty. Right. We were having the same conversations that we're having about the Chiefs now, right?
Right.
You're in the division with that kind of contender. And slowly but surely, the Bills, the Jets, the Dolphins just sort of gave up. I don't mean that. Of course, they all, worked really hard and tried to show up and win football games, but they went through the Jets went through head coach after head coach after head coach because they could never win the division. Because who's going to keep your head coach when you can't win the division after 5 years, right? Maybe you get a wild card spot here or there, but you're not going to keep that. The first time that head coach was 7-9, he's out.
Right.
That level of patience just doesn't exist in the NFL. But you can't win the division when you share it with Tom Brady's the Brady Belichick Patriots at the height of their power. So ultimately, you will burn through build after build after build, failing to get past this absolute bedrock ceiling that you're stuck under. And the best way to turn a franchise into a laughingstock, like the Dolphins were at points in that stretch, like the Jets were at points in that stretch, and the Bills were at points in that stretch, is to just churn through GMs and coaches like you're the Browns in the 2010s. That's how you get 1-31, right?
Yeah.
Or 1-15 Cam Cameron Dolphins year. That's how you get that. And the Raiders feel like they're going to be the first domino to fall in this. Now that the Chiefs are going to be like this for a decade, and the Raiders feel like the team that have just kind of decayed into nothing. And now they've got a new head coach, and then they're going to do a new GM, and maybe they're getting 2 or 3 years, maybe they'll get another new head coach and GM because, well, they haven't won the division. Why would we keep them around? Yeah, it feels like that is just life when you share a division with a team like the Chiefs. Yeah. Maybe the Chargers are going to be the team that like sort of challenges them sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Like you'll steal a division from them once every 8 or 9 years, like the one year the Dolphins won it, but for the Broncos and the Raiders, they feel like they're about to fall into deep, deep, dark depths for a long, long time. Sorry, Raiders and Broncos fans, you probably didn't want to hear that.
Didn't deserve it. I promise you that. Certainly don't deserve it. Maybe next year when they're in striking distance of, or maybe next year when the Raiders are in striking distance of the quarterback. Maybe when Denver knows a little bit more about Bo Nix, perhaps by next season, like there's some opportunity there. But until then, I don't know what you're looking forward to for 2024. All right, Luke, why don't you wrap
you
this
could
up
do what Greg Olson did at Christian McCaffrey's wedding, which is my like of the week, which is drink until you can't feel stuff anymore. The pictures coming out of this are hilarious. Christian McCaffrey's wedding has become a headline in the fashion world. I'm not even going to touch that. But
Shanahan's mustache.
But it was like about the wedding dress and stuff. It was like covered in Vogue, and it wasn't like well received. It's a whole thing, different kind of podcast. But every picture in this, you can tell that Greg Olson is just like show wasty, and I love it. Go to your best friend's wedding and get absolutely smacked, so you don't have to think about being a Raiders or a Broncos fan anymore. Just for one night, it's nice.
Take a lift home, take an Uber home, take a lift home, have a designated driver, all that kind of stuff. Let's not forget to say that, of course, as well. Yeah. Which is obviously huge. All right, y'all. We appreciate you very much for tuning in for another episode of Locked On NFL. Don't forget, new episodes every single day. It's the off season, but there's no off season here at Locked On. So I have new episodes for you every single Monday through Friday. And Luke and I will be back with you next Tuesday, next week, as we continue to break down all the big stories. We get closer and closer and closer to training camp. Rookies reporting in a little bit less than, or almost exactly a week from today. So that's going to be awesome. Can't wait for all that to get started. So make sure you come through for more Locked On NFL here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every